And today we are talking to Adam Cant, and he's going to help us with a day in the life of a construction manager. Hello, Adam. Thanks for being involved in our Day in the Life series.
That's all right, no worries at all.
So first off, can you tell us a little bit about how long you've been involved in the building and construction industry?
Yeah, I'm sounding old when I say this. It was 1995. So what's that, 28 years sort of, I suppose now. I started as an apprentice carpenter and did my trade a bit different than most people. I actually did my trade in the army and did 6 years in the army as a carpenter, and then got out and basically, just civilian life, I suppose, and just gradually worked in different roles to now being a project manager, I suppose, is my title role on my email. So that's sort of where I am now. And
so do you typically, did you think when you came out of that time in the army and you had all the trades, did you think you'd work towards that in the end, or did you think your career trajectory would go whichever way it went? Was that always an end goal, to be sort of in the—
No, not at all, really. I actually gave it a break for a couple of years, just working as a carpenter, and wasn't too sure what I wanted to do. I knew that whilst I enjoyed carpentry, I knew that I didn't want to be a carpenter until the day I retire. It's physically pretty hard.
Yes.
And especially being in Queensland, it's very hot in summer. And so I actually got out of the industry and went into a bit of business with some family members. And then, decided maybe 6 or 7 years later, got back into it, and I'd gone and I actually started doing a bit of training where I was training some apprentice carpenters. And then from there decided that really I didn't have any qualifications at that stage. I was probably early 30s maybe. Right. And realised that I only had my carpentry certificate, and then decided from there, let's go and do some qualifications. So I did my Cert 4 in building construction, my diploma in building construction. Yep. And then on to the advanced diploma. And I suppose from there, just got a few sort of different roles that those qualifications opened up. And and then probably for the last, I'm guessing 4 years, I suppose, been in more of a project management role. We've been in the company I worked for was quite small when I joined. He was just a guy my age who was a builder. And I just started helping him out, doing a little bit of estimation and contracts administration. Yes. And then as the company grew, and he he likes to be on site, and he said, look, this is what I want to do. The role's going to change. Are you happy to evolve into that role as it comes? And I said, yeah. So then I suppose, I've been with that company about 4 years, but I said just started off doing just helping out, I suppose, because we were mates, and then it grew into what it is today. So I know we probably had a turnover of 2 million, and now we've got a turnover of about 30 million. Wow. So it's grown. Yeah, we just got a lot bigger, took on some retirement villages and things like that. And I suppose that's where it's come to today. And is it typically, that's a residential class of building, isn't it, for retirement villages? Yeah, it is. It's a tricky one because they're residential construction, I suppose, but the commercial, the contract side of it is commercial, because we're building it for a retirement village developer. So all of that comes under the commercial banner, but the actual physically constructing their house is a residential build. So lots, it's a bit of a tricky townhouses / duplexes. But exactly. In volume. So these ones are all standalone sort of 2-bedroom homes, and they're just within a village. And then we build the recreational centre, which has got pools and tennis courts and things like that. Oh, so we normally build them in stages, I suppose, is the way to describe them. I build 10 at a time, and it'll take us 3 months to build those 10, and then we build the next 10. And I suppose that's been going for a few years now, and probably got a few years to go as well. So going back to your education, so you said you've done the Cert 4 in building and construction, the diploma of building and construction, and finally the advanced diploma of building and construction management. So how did you manage the study with working at the same time? Was that a challenge for you, or did you manage? Tell us how you managed that. I was pretty lucky, I think. I think mainly probably where I was as far as in my life, as far as wife and kids like that, we had only one newborn, and I don't want to sound like the typical dad here, but I didn't have to do a whole lot. It'd be very challenging for me now. Whilst I was still there, obviously, in being a dad, but now it would be very hard because my kids do sport and they're a lot older. Yes. And I'm a lot more involved in that. But at that time, my eldest son was really still only a couple months old, so we were at home anyway.
Mhm.
So I was just able to. It's not like now, whereas weekends I've got soccer and swimming and all these other things that the kids do. So
Yes.
I suppose I had the time then to dedicate to it because I was either at work or I was at home. So I actually found it pretty easy, to be honest with you. But I understand when my students are struggling to find that time. I look at it now and go, yeah, I would be time challenged now in the role that I do, to then try and find those extra hours for study. So it's definitely a balancing act. But yeah, I suppose I was able to manage it pretty well, I think.
And do you think there are a lot of employers out there in building and construction who would look favourably upon somebody actually studying while they're working, but provide some extra study time, or is that very difficult to attain?
Yes and no. Like, I think it depends too on how the employment is set up, the employment agreement. I've done training for Transformed where I've gone in and trained supervisors for a variety of different companies. And those larger companies see the value that it brings in upskilling their staff.
Yes.
I think it's more so the smaller operator that's like, well, they might only have one supervisor. And in upskilling that supervisor, well, they don't really have anyone on site to actually cover them whilst they're on site.
Right.
And I think also too in those larger organisations, there's a lot of career progression within those big tier 1 companies as well. So the student sees the value in doing that study because it's an avenue then to be able to progress through the company.
Fair enough.
I think I think those smaller companies that there's not really that internal growth, I suppose. So I think because there's not that internal growth, the employers are happy for them to do it. But I think a lot of the time it doesn't overly benefit that small time builder, if that makes sense.
Fair enough. So it has to be more self-paced for the individual to drive their own education.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So you're currently project manager / contracts manager. Can you share what your role involves? How many people work with you or in your organisation?
It's hard to say, really. I reckon we'd have probably, because they're a mixture. Some people prefer to be on a ABN and subcontract to us, but they're really full-time workers who work solely for us. But I would say we've probably got around 25 to 30 who just solely work for us.
Wow.
That's with we've got 2 people in accounts. We have myself and another project manager, and then we've probably got maybe 4 supervisors, and then from there we've got mainly carpenters and labourers who work for us. So as far as my daily role goes, so pretty much if I can just start how a project would work, we're pretty lucky where we don't tender on stuff that we just see on tender websites or we, I suppose, don't chase the work, if that makes sense, because the guy I work for had his license for about 20 years. We get approached, and a lot of past clients or past clients' friends will say, hey, I've got this designed. You built my mate's house or his factory. Could you please give me a price? So that's sort of, I suppose, where it starts. So there's
a lot of word of mouth referral relationships.
100%, yeah. And the guy I work for, we don't have Facebook, Instagram, and really only put a website up about 12 months ago. So it's all just been it's all been word of mouth. So from there, I'll get given the plans, and I'll just then, I suppose, do the tender. So in order doing the tender, on doing the estimation. So from there, we have software. So that software, I can calculate how much concrete I need, how much steel, and I can sort of do that whole estimation myself, but I'll still send that out to our different trades. So I suppose by me, if I'm talking, I don't know, plastering, I'll work out what I think the plastering is going to cost, but I'll still give it to 2 plasterers to actually give me a price. And then I suppose I do the accumulation of all those prices and check them against what I think it should be. And then from there, I go, this is what we think this building is going to cost to build. So then from there, I fancy it up a bit, I suppose, put it into a presentation to be able to present that to the owner. And then we'll sit down, myself and the builder, and go through them. And we like to be very open and say, this is where we think the savings are. So if this sort of fits your budget, that's great. But if you think it's a little bit too dear, this is where we think we can save some money. And so we go through that. And then, if we win that project, then pretty much from there, then I write up the contract to the client, get them to sign, then do, I suppose, the schedule. So create the schedule, and then I use the people who are doing the Cert 4. There's it's a bit old school, but I still use it. It's called a call forward sheet, which is really my schedule, and it tells me that when, like after I create my schedule, if I know that I've got, I don't know, roofing that's got to come, on the first day of next month, this call forward sheet will tell me I've got to order it 3 weeks in advance. So it's almost like a diary that tells me what I need to do today to have something on site in 1 week, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks, depending on the lead time on what that material is.
Okay.
So I sort of create one of those. I create all the contracts with the subcontractors to say, yeah, we're engaging you as the plumber to do this scope of work, and this is what the money is. This is what the value of that is. And then from there, once that all gets done, I pretty much hand it over to the supervisor. So the supervisor then runs that project, as in like the daily running of, he's checking to make sure, like, I suppose, the quality of work, the trade's going to be there on the day they're meant to be.
Yes.
And I probably catch up with him at least once a week, but we probably talk, daily on the phone.
Yes.
And because I've done all the scheduling for it, I suppose, and he's just making sure that it's going to be there when it needs to be there, and the quality's all good.
So he's your eyes on the ground, so to speak.
Exactly, 100%. Yeah, he's exactly. And then I suppose what I really focus on is then the profitability of the project. So when I go and estimate it, like it never runs exactly how you estimate it. There's always things that pop up with variations, or something takes a bit longer than what you need it to be. So prime example, we hire some of our scissor lifts and boom lifts and things like that.
Yes.
So I'll schedule that I need to have them for this 4-week period, but then, we might get rain and we can't use them. So all of a sudden now I've got 5 weeks worth of hire instead of 4 weeks worth of hire.
Yes.
And so I'm going, okay, well, my hire budget is now going to be over $1,500. So then what I'm trying to do is then for the rest of that budget, try and see if I can make any savings.
I see.
If it's something like $1,500, like I don't really worry about it. But to give you an example, with COVID going and all the price increases, I'd quoted a roof that came in at 80,000, and then the actual cost of it was 110,000. So straight away there's like $30,000 loss, and I'm going, okay, well, I can't keep picking up $30,000 losses. What can I do? And that's why we always get 2 prices on everything. And so my preferred plasterer, he might say have his quote might have been 80,000, but the less preferred might have been 65,000. Whereas I would have used like the dearer one if everything was going fine. But now that I know that I'm running a bit behind budget, I'll use that less preferred subcontractor. And just know that I'll have to manage him a bit more. I can't just say go in and do it. I'll use the less preferred one because I know I can save 15,000, and we'll just have to manage them to make sure they're doing it well. So I suppose I'm tracking that on a weekly basis just to see where we sit, because there's no point getting to the end and you do a 9-month project and you make $100 out of it. So that's why I focus a lot of mine. And and just sort of make sure the supervisor's aware of that as well, to make sure hire items go back when they need to go back. Any variations he tells me about, so that then I can raise those and get paid for them. So I suppose that's sort of how the duration of the project goes.
So it sounds like a busy day to day, a lot of changing items, possibly last minute things, and then you can plan a bit more when you've got, I guess if you forecast changes, you can see if they're going to come in or not. So fair to say that you've got a fairly good knowledge of some software programs that help you do that, but you've also got the underpinning knowledge of what it's like to be on a site, people relationship, a good network, and people that you can rely on, or maybe not rely on as well to get the job to the end. And then of course you've got Mother Nature coming in over the top of it. And when she decides to throw some 2 weeks worth of rain or whatever, we've had this crazy weather system coming through, you're really having to revisit a whole lot of deliverables.
Yeah, and I find the weather really impacted our costs a lot as well. Like, to give you an example, we dug out, we were doing a big tilt panel factory, and we had the footings excavated ready to pour, and then from there we got this massive storm, and all our trenches had collapsed in, and we had to redig them.
Oh, dear.
And we needed then to get, because they were then bigger, we had to put in 30% more concrete than what had been allowed for.
Oh, I see.
That's another one where the weather not only impacts the time frame, it can also impact the cost of the project, of the damage it can cause as well.
Yes. Okay. This is tremendously interesting, can I just say, because I'm about to embark on a first floor addition, and I've done 2 bathrooms. So I know enough to be dangerous. But when you were talking about variations, all the dollar things were going off in my head. So yeah, variations, I've got to make sure I've got my budget for my variations, even though it's, you know, it's not a small thing in terms of a residential build, I guess, when I look at the bill, but or the estimate, but all those ways it can change. I'm going to have to make sure I've got my contingency.
Well, that's the thing. We have our estimating program gives us straight away a 2% contingency. So when I add up all the pricing, I can choose it. We always put a 2% on there, but 2% doesn't sound like much, but a lot of our contracts worth about $2 million.
Yep.
So 2% of $2 million is it's a fair enough contingency to work with. So that's sort of what we do. Yeah.
So it's fair to say that your role involves a lot of time in the office, but also on-site telephone calls, checking in, and so on.
Yep.
If you could give someone who is thinking about becoming a construction manager 3 tips about getting into a construction management role, what would they be?
The first one I would say is don't expect that you need to know everything. That's one thing that I've found is that a lot of people think that, I'm going to be a project manager, construction manager. You know, there's a lot of knowledge that people think they need to know, and you just lean on other people. Like, whilst I'm a carpenter, like I realise that's one thing I've noticed in our company. We all bring different things to the table, which make us a good team. So the guys are the supervisors. Like, don't run, they would run rings around me trying to physically build those buildings that we do. And I just realised that that's not something I haven't done for a long time. It's been a long time since I was a carpenter. And I'm okay with that when I rock up to site that they see things that I don't. But then my strength is, I think, around organisation, contracts and estimation, and those more, I suppose, the stuff that I've learned in my qualifications. So that'd be the first thing I'd say is just, don't feel the pressure to feel like you have to know absolutely everything. You've got a team of people around you, and you've got building certifiers and consultants. So I think a lot of people are scared by that. I think the other thing, I think the tips I would give is just try and be time efficient and organised. So one of the guys who I used to work with, he was just not very time efficient. He had trouble delegating, and I think that's why you have, I actually really like it when our projects go live, because I can just delegate that whole thing to the supervisor and I just oversee it. Whereas that's why I've got a supervisor that he's going to run it from day to day, and I'm just going to check in with him. So that would be me, and try and be organised. And I think the way you can be organised is through delegation. It doesn't mean you've got to be hard-nosed and be yelling at people. You just need to know what tasks you can give to other people, or otherwise you just can't, you can't do everything. So I would think, be strong in your delegation. And then, I'm just trying to think what a third one would be. I think organisation, that's, I suppose, part of the delegation, being organised. So just, a lot of people I've found, being a carpenter, and a lot of students that I train, that they only get a bit scared that their IT skills aren't where they need to be. And no one's ever are. Like, just about most people who are in the role that I'm in started swinging a hammer. I know there's a lot of people who go the university route. There's a lot of people who started like I did, and our computer skills aren't probably where we think they should be. But it's just like any other skill. The more you do something, like, don't be scared of it. I've got one of my supervisors, and he was very adverse to change in technology. So he's probably 44, and I've sort of just said, look, let's just give you baby steps. And so we're, training him in how to, like, he's not a dummy. He can use a computer, but on site, he doesn't use any technology at all. So he was, I think, a bit worried he would get it wrong. So my advice would be, they're not expected to be an expert in your technological part, but that will help you be a better organizer.
Yeah,
so that,
absolutely.
I think, will help you be, by having, and I know we're looking at getting a new system at the moment for estimation, and I'm not going to be across it, but the only way to get better at it is to use it. So that's, exactly. I would be organised and not be scared of the technology that's out there, or otherwise we'd still be running everything off a paper sheet that they did back in the 80s.
Yeah, with a builder's pencil.
Yeah. Exactly. So if you're not strong at it, that's fine. It's like any other skill. We just do it and we get better at it. So just try and embrace it and let people know that you're not that great at it, but put the effort in to actually get better at it.
So just to summarize, good time management skills are really key, particularly for managing your day. And also rely on the skill set of others, and don't think you have to know it all, but also build good relationships so you can have trusted relationships with the people that you work with for the betterment of the project. And finally, don't be scared of tech. It's there to help, and just take your time with it. Yeah, because I think
exactly right.
Every day there's a new app coming out. Every day there's an upgrade to programs, and it can be overwhelming. But even using it in small increments, I think you get better at it. And then you start to think of how it can help you, and the shortcuts and the time efficiencies. Yeah. And I think that goes for a lot of roles, actually. But I also think just picking up a phone and having a chat is a really good thing as well, which you've highlighted. Yeah. So that's great.
My thing is, don't ever be embarrassed to say you don't know. That's one thing I say it all the time. You know, even when I'm training,
that's a life
I say
tip.
To people, look, I'm not going to know everything. Yeah, exactly. I say, look, you're not going to know everything, but hopefully you know where to find that answer. So whether it's out of a standard or a building code or out of a contract or through a consultant, don't be scared to say you don't know, but let's try and find where that answer is. That's one thing I find too. A lot of people do ask me questions in the role that I'm in, and I was like, I don't know, but I'll get back to you. And I find there's a big tendency for people, especially when looking at how to, what's the word I'm looking for, compliantly build something, that people are like, oh, well, on the last job I did it like this. And it's like, well, how do you know that was right? So where do we go to find that right answer? You know, go to a building code, go to an Australian standard, and the more you use those things, and the more you know where that answer is. So we're having that on our last job. We did a staircase, and it had to have some disability access requirements to it. Right. And one of the supervisors, they were having a chat to one of the carpenters, and the carpenter was like, oh, well, this is when I work for this other builder, this is how we did it. And my supervisor was like, well, I don't think that's right. And so they just rang me and had a chat about it. And I said, look, I'll look it up in the building code. I don't know off the top of my head, but and we just looked over it and went, okay, well, you can't argue with this. Here's the building code. It says like this, so that's the way we're going to do it. And I think that's the sort of stuff where you want to get to, is don't be afraid to ask a question, but try and find out where that answer comes from.
Seek and share information.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%.
Well, Adam, I know you've probably got maybe sport or something else to get to. So thanks again for being involved in our Day in the Life series and giving us some insight into the role of a manager in construction. We really appreciate it. And thanks again.